The woman staring back at me from the fitting room mirror seemed like a stranger. 67 years had taught me to embrace practical clothing, loose blouses, comfortable pants, outfits designed for work rather than display. Yet here I stood, in a navy dress adorned with an delicate brooch, an ensemble that cost more than I typically spent on clothes in half a year. "It's very flattering, Mrs. Thorndyke." The sales assistant smiled, smoothing the fabric across my shoulders. "The shade brings out your eyes wonderfully." I nodded, unused to such compliments. Today, though, I wanted to believe them. After all, I was preparing for my only son's wedding. Lion would marry his Pauline in 2 weeks, and despite the complexity of our relationship, I intended to look dignified. "I'll take it," I said, retreating to the changing room. While the clerk processed my purchase, I gazed through the window at bustling Wilmington Street. Strange how, in all my years, I'd never left this town. Here, I'd opened my first laundromat, buried my husband, raised my son. Now Lion was getting married, perhaps the final significant event worth remaining in Wilmington for. After paying by card, I exited with my bag. My aging Toyota waited in the lot. Sliding behind the wheel, I checked the time, 2 o'clock. My appointment with the wedding coordinator was at 3. Pearl Weddings occupied space in one of the newer business centers on the city's outskirts, a spacious room with pristine walls and countless photographs of beaming couples. A pleasant, young woman named Carrie ushered me into the conference area. "Hello, Mrs. Thorndyke. We've assembled all the documents you requested," she said, arranging folders across the table. "You're certain you want your involvement kept confidential?" I nodded. That had been my prerequisite from the beginning. Yes, Lion and Pauline cannot know I'm covering most expenses. They believe the bride's parents are handling everything. Carrie looked puzzled. This likely wasn't common in her experience. Usually parents competed to advertise their generosity, not conceal it. "My son and I have a complicated relationship," I explained, though I owed no explanation. "He wouldn't accept money directly from me. He believes it would diminish his standing with his fiancée." I didn't share the complete story, how after my husband died 16 years ago, I'd built a business empire and raised my son alone. How Lion had grown ashamed of his background during college. How he'd grown increasingly distant over the years, finding me too simple, insufficiently educated for his new social sphere. When I sold the laundry chain 5 years ago for a substantial sum, his interest suddenly rekindled. But only in my money, never in me. "Everything will remain confidential as agreed," Carrie assured me. "Here are the contracts for the venue, catering, photography, decor, and entertainment." I examined each document carefully. Substantial money, over $80,000, but I could afford it. Lion was my only child, and despite our differences, I wanted his wedding to be beautiful. "You realize if you cancel less than 7 days before the event, we cannot offer a full refund?" Carrie asked, extending a pen. "I understand." I signed the final page. "But nobody's canceling this wedding." That day, I had no idea how profoundly ironic those words would become. The 2 weeks vanished. During that entire period, Lion never called, never asked if I planned to attend. I received no official invitation either, though I assumed it was simply an oversight. After all, what mother isn't invited to her own son's wedding? The wedding morning dawned sunny. I rose early, showered, leisurely styled my thick silver hair. I wore the purchased dress, applied subtle makeup, placed the wedding gift, a check for a generous sum, in an elegant envelope. The Belvedere Hotel, hosting the ceremony, was Wilmington's most luxurious establishment. I parked among the expensive vehicles, momentarily uncertain. Perhaps I should have hired a car service instead of arriving in my old Toyota. No, that was foolish. I'd always been practical, and I wouldn't change for others' opinions. The hotel lobby teemed with people. Guests in elegant suits and dresses stood in clusters, conversing and laughing. I scanned the crowd for familiar faces. Most present were strangers, apparently Pauline's friends and family. Over the years, Lion had barely introduced me to his circle. "Grandmother," I heard a joyful cry. I turned. Eloise, my 22-year-old granddaughter from Lion's first marriage, hurried toward me, tall, slender, with my blue eyes and her father's dark hair. Eloise was the only one who genuinely maintained contact with me. "You came!" She embraced me. "I was afraid you'd decide to stay away because of—" She didn't finish, but I understood. Because of my strained relationship with Lion. How could I miss my own son's wedding? I smiled. "You look lovely, darling." Eloise wore a soft blue bridesmaid's dress. She tucked her hair behind her ear, glancing around. "Come on, I'll introduce you to everyone." But at that moment, Lion approached us. My son looked tense despite the festive occasion. At 42, he remained handsome, tall, trim, with a neatly groomed beard showing gray. His eyes, exact copies of his late father's, regarded me with barely concealed irritation. "Mom," he said, as though he couldn't believe his eyes. "What are you doing here?" I was confused. This wasn't the greeting I'd expected. "I came to your wedding, naturally." Lion glanced around nervously, then took my elbow, steering me away from the other guests. "Listen," he began in a low but firm voice. "I thought we'd discuss this. You're not on the guest list." I stared at him, uncomprehending. We'd discussed nothing. He'd called me twice in the past month, both conversations brief and formal. "What are you talking about, Lion? How could I not be invited to my own son's wedding?" He sighed with the expression of someone forced to explain obvious things to a child. "Mom, listen. This is an elite event. Pauline's parents are here. They're friends, our colleagues." He paused, searching for words. "I don't think you'd be comfortable here." In that moment, I realized he hadn't simply failed to invite me. He deliberately didn't want me present. I, a woman who'd spent her life working with her hands, building a business from nothing, wasn't suitable for his new family's elite society. "You're ashamed of me." It wasn't a question, but a statement. "No, of course not," Lion replied hastily, though his eyes told a different story. "It's just, Pauline is very particular about everything being perfect. Her parents have invested considerable money, and you don't want your laundromat mother ruining the experience," I finished. For him. "Mom, don't start." He sounded annoyed. "I'm just asking you to understand. We can get together after the honeymoon, informally." At that moment, Pauline joined us. She looked stunning at 38, slender, flawlessly made up and coiffed. Wearing a designer gown, her face showed polite surprise. "Lion, darling, is everything all right?" she asked, giving me an appraising glance. "Yes, everything's fine," he replied. "Mom was just leaving." Pauline offered a manufactured smile. "Oh, Mrs. Thorndyke, such a shame you couldn't attend the ceremony. Perhaps another time." She spoke as if my visit were already concluded, as if I were merely a casual acquaintance stopping by briefly. I looked at Lion, expecting him to intervene, to defend me somehow. But he remained silent, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry, but you weren't invited," he finally said quietly. "Please leave." I felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall, not here, not in front of them. For years, I'd overlooked his neglect, made excuses, pretended everything was fine. But today, something broke completely inside me. "Whatever you say?" I maintained my composure. "Congratulations to both of you." I turned to leave, but Eloise caught my arm. "Grandma, please stay." Tears stood in her eyes. "I want you here." I gently touched her cheek. "It's all right, sweetheart. Call me tomorrow." I headed for the exit, feeling the stares of curious guests. Some had clearly witnessed our exchange. I wondered what they'd been told. Did they know the groom's mother wasn't invited to her own son's wedding? Emerging from the hotel, I breathed deeply. The sun still shone brilliantly, yet I felt surrounded by darkness. I walked stiffly to my car and sat behind the wheel. For several minutes, I simply sat, staring straight ahead, trying to comprehend what had happened. Then I opened my purse and retrieved my phone. The display read 4:20 p.m. The ceremony would start in 40 minutes. The banquet at 7. All prepaid. By me. I looked at the envelope containing the gift still in my bag. Then I slowly started the engine and drove from the Belvedere Hotel parking lot, where my son was celebrating the beginning of a new life without his mother. The drive home seemed endless. I drove automatically, barely noticing traffic signals or other vehicles. Fragments of phrases rattled through my mind. You weren't invited. Mom's just leaving. Elite event. Each word struck like a physical blow. 67 years of life. And this was the culmination, expelled from my son's wedding as an unwanted guest. My street greeted me with its usual tranquility. Ancient maple trees lining the road, tidy middle-class houses. Nothing had changed here in decades. I parked outside my single-story house with its white picket fence. For several minutes, I sat in the car, unable to summon the will to exit. As if remaining inside could postpone the moment when I'd have to acknowledge the reality of what had occurred. Finally, I emerged and walked toward the porch. Keys trembled in my hand as I unlocked the door. Crossing the threshold, I kicked off my shoes and entered the living room. The house where I'd spent most of my life seemed alien and empty today. I looked at photographs on the mantelpiece. Lion as a child, a grinning boy with a missing front. Tooth. Lion the teenager with his soccer ball, Lion the college graduate. In every picture, he smiled at me. When had things changed? At what point had I become a burden to him, a source of embarrassment? I picked up a photograph of my late husband. Derek and me standing with young Lion at the beach. Derek was 38 then, I was 33, Lion was 8. We looked so happy, so carefree, an ordinary middle-class family on vacation. What would you say now, Derek? I whispered, tracing my finger across my husband's face in the photograph. What would you say to your son? But Derek had been gone, 16 years. A sudden heart attack had taken him when Lion was 26. Back then, my son still loved me, still visited every weekend, still wasn't ashamed of his origins. I returned the photograph to its place and sank into a chair. Derek. And I had started our small business together, a corner laundromat on Maple and 4th. He managed equipment and negotiations. I handled operations and bookkeeping. When he died, everything fell on me simultaneously. But I managed. More than that, over the next decade, I expanded to a chain of 7 laundromats throughout Wilmington. In Nye. My kitchen drawer, I still kept records of checks I'd written Lion over the years. Down payment for his apartment when he moved out. His wedding to Veronica, Eloise's mother. Lawyer fees for their divorce. Eloise's private school tuition. Paying off his credit cards when he was temporarily in a financial hole. I'd always been there for him, emotionally and financially. But with each passing year, Lion grew more distant. His new friends, his career at the insurance company, his aspirations toward high society, all gradually created a chasm between us. When I sold the business 5 years ago, Lion suddenly showed unprecedented interest in my life. He visited, called, inquired about my health. I wasn't naive. I realized he was primarily concerned with money from the sale. But I wanted to believe genuine care lay beneath that interest. The sale amount was indeed impressive, $2,300,000. More money than I'd ever seen. I bought myself a new car, the same Toyota I'd driven to the wedding, remodeled the house, invested the rest in safe instruments on a financial advisor's recommendation. Upon learning the amount, Lyon presented a brilliant business plan. He wanted me to invest in some startup his friend was developing. I declined. It seemed too risky. He took offense, called me old-fashioned, unable to envision the future. I reminded him that my old-fashioned approach had created a successful business. We fought. Afterward, his visits became less frequent, his calls shorter. When he announced his engagement to Pauline 8 months ago, I was overjoyed. I thought perhaps this new chapter would help mend our relationship. Naive old woman. The phone in my purse rang, jolting me from memories. The bank's number appeared on screen, a routine weekly call from my personal manager, standard procedure, for clients with substantial deposits. Mrs. Thorndyke, good afternoon. I heard Richard's cheerful voice. Just checking that everything's satisfactory with your accounts and investments. I sat silent, staring at the wall clock. 5:15. The ceremony had already begun. Lyon and Pauline were exchanging vows. In 90 minutes, the banquet would commence. A lavish dinner for 120 people with expensive wines, live music, dancing until morning, all paid for by me. Mrs. Thorndyke, are you there? Richard asked worriedly. Yes, I'm sorry. I cleared my throat. I have a question, Richard. If I wanted to cancel payments scheduled for the next few hours, is that possible? Technically, yes, if they haven't been finalized yet. Which payments are we discussing? I opened my email and located a message from the wedding agency detailing expenses, multiple transactions totaling approximately $80,000. The Belvedere Hotel, Golden Leaf Catering Company, Jameson Photography Studio, Rosemary Floral Design. I read the list, feeling determination building with each word. Richard was silent, clearly surprised. These are quite substantial amounts. Mrs. Thorndyke, may I ask the reason? They're for my son's wedding services, but there have been unforeseen circumstances. I paused. I want to cancel all payments immediately. I understand, Richard said carefully, but I must warn you, there may be penalties for cancellation. I'm prepared for any penalties, I interrupted. Please, do whatever's necessary. There was a pause. I could hear Richard typing. All right, I can see the payments in the system. Most are scheduled for tomorrow, so we have time to stop them. Some may have been partially authorized already. I'll contact our back office immediately. Thank you, Richard. One more thing. I'd been thinking, if I canceled the payments, the money remained in my account. But what would I do with it? It had been intended for Lyon, for his happy new beginning in a life where I had no place. I'd like to open a trust account in my granddaughter's name, Eloise Thorndyke. I want to transfer these funds there. Of course, Mrs. Thorndyke. That can be arranged. We'll need some paperwork, but we can begin the process today. We discussed details, and Richard promised to call back once the payments were stopped. Hanging up, I felt strangely liberated. For the first time in ages, I'd acted decisively, not simply going along with Lyon's wishes, not turning a blind eye to his treatment of me. My next call was to the wedding agency. Carrie answered after 3 rings. Pearl Weddings, how may I help? You? Hello, Carrie. This is Leslie Thorndyke. Oh, Mrs. Thorndyke. She sounded surprised. The wedding's already underway. Everything's proceeding perfectly. Is there something you need to clarify? I'm calling to inform you that I'm canceling all wedding-related payments. Silence. Then Carrie laughed uncertainly, as if she'd heard a bad joke. I'm sorry, what? You're joking, right? No, Carrie. I just contacted the bank. All transactions will be stopped. But that's impossible. Her voice shook. The ceremony is in progress. Guests have gathered. The banquet starts. In just over an hour. You can't just... I said firmly. And I am. Check your force majeure clause in our contract. Mrs. Thorndyke, please. Panic crept into her voice. Let's discuss this. What happened? Maybe we can find a solution. The solution is simple, Carrie. The payments are canceled. But the vendors, the venue, this is going to be a scandal. Not my problem. I could almost physically feel Carrie trying to collect her thoughts. Okay. I have to inform the bride and groom. Go ahead, I replied in a steady voice. Tell them their sponsor withdrew funding. But they think the bride's parents paid, Carrie exclaimed. How do I explain? That's not my concern. Though you could tell them the truth, that the groom's mother, who wasn't invited to the wedding, was paying for their party. Oh my God, Carrie mumbled. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Now you do. Good day, Carrie. I ended the call and set the phone on the table. My hands trembled, but not from anxiety or fear. It was a strange, almost forgotten sense of freedom. For so many years, I'd let Lion manipulate me, taking advantage of my love and money without offering anything in return. I'd waited for gratitude, for respect, for simple human warmth. I'd received nothing. Suddenly, the phone rang again. Eloise's name appeared on screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Grandma! My granddaughter's voice sounded worried. Where are you? Why did you leave? I closed my eyes. Eloise was the only person I truly cared about in this situation. Your father asked me to leave, dear. Said I wasn't invited. What? She exclaimed. That can't be. He couldn't have said that. Yes, Eloise, he did. On the other end, I heard muffled commotion. The ceremony had apparently concluded, and guests were moving toward the banquet hall. That's horrible, Grandma. I'm going to talk to him. Make him apologize. He had no right. Don't, sweetheart. I interrupted gently. Don't ruin your celebration. Have fun, dance, enjoy yourself. What celebration? Tears filled her voice. How can I enjoy myself knowing you were treated like this? It's not fair. Many things in life aren't fair, dear. This isn't the first time, won't be the last. Grandmother, Eloise suddenly spoke, more quietly, almost whispering. Something strange is happening here. The hotel manager is arguing with Papa and Pauline about something. They look very upset. I didn't respond. So Richard had already taken action. The payments were blocked, or Carrie had broken the news to the organizers. Either way, the consequences of my decision were already manifesting. Grandma, are you there? Eloise asked anxiously. Yes, sweetheart. Listen, whatever happens tonight, remember I love you. Nothing will change that. You're scaring me. She laughed nervously. You sound like you're saying goodbye. No, of course not, I reassured her. I just want you to know you can always count on me. Always. I know, Grandma. I love you too. Voices on the phone called for Eloise. I have to go, she said quickly. I think there are problems starting with the banquet. I'll call you later. Okay. Darling, go. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. It was done. No turning back. Whatever happened next, I knew I'd made the right decision. For the first time in years, I'd stopped being an invisible ATM for my son and started respecting myself. The phone rang again. This time Lion's name appeared. I stared at the screen, watching the phone vibrate on the table. 1 ring, 2, 3, then silence. A minute later, a message arrived. Mom, we need to talk urgently. Call me back. I placed the phone face down. I had no desire to speak with my son, at least not today. Let him realize what he'd done first. Let him feel at least some fraction of the pain he'd caused me. I stood from the chair and walked to the window. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink. Strangely, for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. As if I'd shed a heavy weight I'd been carrying for decades. The phone rang again, and again, and again.